Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell on your afternoon drive. One of our favorite people on the planet, Tim Brando from Fox Sports, joins us. And Mr. Brando, where are you?
Where are you?
I am in Norman, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, where Spencer Tillman met his wife in the end zone after his first touchdown run and was never the same again.
What a score!
That is a great story.
What a score.
I got a little women's basketball to do tomorrow. We got
Wow.
pair of women's games on Big Fox tomorrow in the afternoon. Only Big East game with the men is the Gus Bus and Jim Jackson there with you guys at Gamble tomorrow. So I'll be as they say, winging my way back to the chateau, watching that one when they play. So I'll be curious to see how that game plays out. Are we going to see the Connecticut that I saw against Marquette, or the Connecticut that, as they say, got railroaded the same way they did the Marquette in by Creighton the other night? It'll be interesting to see.
Put your perspective on women's basketball. Like, how many games do you get asked to get called, and like what is your perspective as far as 2024 NCAA women's basketball compared to what we were dealing with 20 years ago?
Oh, it's unbelievable, Ben. I mean, it's I have no problem. I tell people all the time, they'll say, "God, they got you on a women's game." I'm like, yeah, I did Baylor in Texas back on December the 30th. Texas is number 5 in the country. Oklahoma is leading the Big 12 conference. They've only lost 2 games. I think they're 12-2 in the league. They're playing an Oklahoma State team that's got 4 players with season-ending injuries and is hovering around 500. So, it probably won't be a very close game, but it'll be a fun game, and it's a rivalry game. But more than anything else, I just think the women's game fundamentally is really a lot of fun to watch. I think a lot of the audience for women's basketball is older. I think you probably know that by going to see Gino's team play and judging that crowd versus the crowd that's at the men's games. I think the older audience really appreciates the women's game. It's a different marketplace than the men's game, but it's a big, booming marketplace. And what happened at last year's Final Four with South Carolina being beaten by Iowa and the Caitlin Clark story as it took off and has continued this past year, along with what Angel Reese and the LSU team did to knock them off in that finale, with Kim Mulkey was able to pull off in just her second year at LSU. It's boomerang, and there's a lot of quality women's basketball out there, and people are showing up in droves. They're celebrating, I think, 50 years of women's basketball here at OU. I mean, there was a time tomorrow. They're doing that celebration tomorrow, so a lot of alumni will be on hand for it. Listen, I did Cheryl Miller's games. Okay, I go that far back.
Now that's a player. That's the greatest.
I called when she beat Kim Mulkey and Leon Barmore's Louisiana Tech team in 1986. Okay, 86. I was doing that game in Long Beach, California, and Cheryl got to the finals, didn't win it. Okay, I also did. You guys know this. I did about 8 of those UConn Tennessee games when I was at CBS. Back when Rebecca was playing, and then Rebecca was my analyst for one of those games. Dawn Staley came in and did one of those games with me between UConn and Tennessee. Just so much talent and so many great games that were played. But even then, I think women's basketball was isolated to just those programs. No one else was really investing in women's basketball. They did at certain schools, but not around the country. It was not something that each conference had bought into. And now all of the conferences have. The Big 12 is loaded. The Pac-12 is loaded. The SEC is loaded. I mean, there's great teams to be found everywhere. And now, as many as, I'd say, 20 or so teams feel like they can make the Final Four in women's basketball. It used to be a fait accompli. You knew who was going to make it, Muffet McGraw's Notre Dame team, Gino's team, Pat's team at Tennessee, and we could argue who the fourth might be, okay? But we kind of knew who each of the participants would be in every Final Four, almost always. And that's not the case anymore, which means the sport is really growing.
Talking to Tim Brando from Fox Sports. How about Indiana taking out Iowa last night? They dropped 86 on Iowa. Caitlin Clark, they showed before the game trying to get into the Indiana gym that it was like a mile down the street of fans. I mean, and I'm not making this point about the game.
Yeah.
It's what she's doing for women's basketball. Paige Beckers or Angel Reese and the star power that they carry are making. And Ben made this point the other day, what little girls now want to be. They want to be these girls now. I think it's a great time in women's sports to see women's softball out there, women's basketball out there. It's just women's hockey is fantastic. UConn, the women's team here is on the verge of winning the Big East, their first ever thing. Well, let me ask you about that Caitlin Clark, too, because you remember Pete Maravich like I do, and everybody's talking about that. She has a shot to be the all-time leader in men's and women's basketball history. Your thoughts on her and just as a player, Caitlin Clark, and what she's done at Iowa?
She is and I have said this because I watched Pete Maravich as an 11-year-old play in a freshman game. Now, remember, let's take these things into consideration, okay, when we start talking about all-time records. All right? And again, this is not an old man talking. I'm not anti-women in sports. I'm not. Okay, I'm not. So let's just get over that before I make this statement. She will, in my opinion, pass Pistol Pete for the all-time scorer, and good for her. I'll celebrate that. But let's not get caught up and say that her impact on basketball is suddenly greater than that of Pistol Pete, because Maravich didn't have a three ball. There were no three-point shots back then. Maravich couldn't play as a freshman. I saw him put 62 on Auburn in a freshman game at LSU at the old John M. Parker Ag Center. LSU only scored 70 in the game, and they won by 6. He scored all but 8 points. Okay? Wow. So, and I'm waiting for him. You know, I was 11 years old. I thought this was like the junior varsity or the B team. Right. We used to call them when we were coming up in the 60s and 70s. I'm thinking he's going to come back out with the varsity and play again. You know, just like you would see it in a high school game. And my uncle, who coerced my father to come down from Shreveport to Baton Rouge to watch the game, I looked up at him and I said, where's everybody going? The building was emptying. Everybody was leaving. They didn't care about basketball in Baton Rouge in 1967. They cared about seeing Pistol Pete. And when he was done playing in the freshman game, it was like a packed house, and there'd be maybe 2,000 people left to watch the varsity play, okay? And so let's think about all those points that he didn't get, okay, because he wasn't playing. And the three-point shot the guy averaged over 42 without a three-point shot. I mean, think about that.
It's fantastic.
So, yeah, I mean, there's no one from an offensive standpoint that ever was better as an offensive basketball player at any level, male, female, whatever, than Pete Maravich. But for the women's game, she is somewhere between, if you want to be modern day, she's somewhere between Steph Curry and Maravich, in my opinion. Because Maravich was, I think, first and foremost, a better passer offensively than he was a shooter. He scored a lot of points because he shot a lot. His percentages weren't always great, but he had to score. Nobody else on the floor could. But he was making passes, guys, that were, bouncing off the heads of his teammates because they weren't ready for the passes he was going to make. He just had an unbelievable sense for that. You see that occasionally with Caitlin, where she'll make a pass and her teammate is like, wow, I didn't know she could do that. And even now, with her teammates. But I think it's great for women's basketball that she's doing this. And I think as long as we say she's the greatest women's basketball player, we're fine. If you say she's the greatest basketball player, now you're talking Bird, Magic, Pistol Pete Maravich. Let's pump the brakes here a little bit. Okay, let's keep it in context. And I think there's a lot of that going on that is bothersome. Yeah, there's a number that Pistol had, and she can eclipse it, and that is a Herculean accomplishment. And I don't want to rain on the parade. But I think that when we allow the conversation to dip into, well, she's the greatest. No, she's not. Because we got a lot of people in media today that believe that if it didn't happen when they could see it, that it didn't exist. Just because it happened before you were born doesn't make it any less significant, okay? So I'll just point that out.
Big East game. They're all big nowadays. I mean, geez, besides, I guess I would say Georgetown, DePaul. Besides that game, everything else is on the bubble. Everything else has so many implications to the conference and to the seedings. Villanova coming to UConn on Saturday. As you mentioned, they kicked the crap out of Marquette. It felt like nothing could go wrong. And then against Creighton in the first half in particular, it felt like nothing could really go right. What did you see in both of those games that may be pointing out some kind of Achilles heel for UConn to improve upon in the next couple of weeks before they hit the Big East tournament?
The major difference between what happened in that game that is a controllable, a lot of things that aren't controllable when you go on the road. For instance, I don't think it's controllable for Danny Hurley to get his players to be as jacked up emotionally as they were before the Marquette game at home. I mean, the XL Center's never been louder, fellas. I mean, it's never been louder than it was that day. And I think there have been some times when people have argued that, and even Danny has told me, hey, when we play in Hartford, we got to do something to get the crowd going. And at Gamble, it's automatically there, okay? Well, the truth of the matter is it was automatically there that day. They were stoked for Marquette. Marquette was number 4. Marquette had rolled in with 8 straight wins. UConn had 13 straight wins. And Marquette was the last team to beat them before they won the national title. And that Cam Jones quote about, we sent them back to their first home after Danny had said when they beat Providence, MSG is our second home. That stung, man, and that was used emotionally by Danny to get them ready for that game. And they came out and played the same kind of game they played against Creighton, the same kind of game they played against Xavier when they just looked unstoppable. It's hard to duplicate that, and particularly when you go on the road against a Creighton team that, may I remind you, was 1 second and 1 bad foul call away from going to the Final Four themselves last year. I mean, Greg McDermott's a hell of a coach, and that's a great offensive basketball team. And now they're getting better play from Ashworth at the point guard position, and that had been their problem, and now he's kind of gotten in control of things, and that's a complete basketball team. Creighton's very capable of going to the Final Four if they get the right draw. I mean, guys, we could be staring at 3 teams going to the Final Four out of the Big East this year. Yeah. If Marquette were to get a good draw where they didn't have to run up against, a team that's really big and athletic, a North Carolina-type team, or a team that's got size similar to that of UConn. Okay, you saw what UConn did. Their front line closed off second-chance opportunities. Their defensive rebounding was so strong, Marquette just had no way if they couldn't make shots from three-point range, and they couldn't. They went 14 minutes before they hit a 3. You can't do that when you're playing a team like UConn and you've got a club that's got that much artillery. Caravan and Newton were a collective 2 of 14, and it didn't matter because Cam Spencer was making shots. Hassan Diarra was making shots. They've got so many weapons. Well, the one major thing that I took away that was different, that is a controllable for UConn, is that Donovan Clingan played that entire first half without committing a foul against Marquette. Okay? And Oso Ighodaro and Tyler Kolek were unable to run the pick and roll to their liking because they were disrupted by what UConn was doing with their zone, and they were disrupted by Clingan as a rim protector.
King Kong.
Yeah, he was King Kong, and you couldn't get close to the rim. But what happened in the Creighton game that was different? Clingan got into early foul difficulty. Clingan had to sit. Clingan was a non-factor the first 10 minutes, and that's when Creighton got out to their big lead. And so they got back into it, and you got to give them a lot of credit to get back to within 10 with a little bit more than 4 minutes left to play, and they had a couple of opportunities to maybe get it down to a 3-possession or 2-possession game, and Creighton closed them out. But you got to give Creighton a lot of credit for that because they're a damn good team too. I mean, UConn to me, as well as Purdue, both of those teams, in my mind, have still separated themselves despite their 2 losses. Purdue lost at Ohio State, who had just fired their coach. And that was an emotional game for them, and kids will do that from time to time. And it's not like Ohio State doesn't have talent. Bruce Thornton is a great player. Ohio State had underachieved. So Purdue had a hiccup. Connecticut had a hiccup. But I think in the grand scheme of things, those two teams, in my mind, are a cut above everybody else in college basketball. And I think in the Big East, I'd still say Marquette, Creighton, and Connecticut are cut above, but I believe Connecticut is more complete than either Creighton or Marquette. And that's the reason why I think they're a runaway freight train, in my view, to at least get back to the Final Four. I don't know if they can win it, but I think when this team gets out of the Big East, just like last year, they're more difficult to beat. The teams in the Big East know how to beat them. That doesn't mean they can beat them, but they know how to beat them. I don't think teams in the NCAA tournament that see a team with this many options are going to have much of a chance if they're the overall number one seed, and I believe they will be.
Brando, you're always the best, always available to us, and God bless you. We love you, man. So thank you so much for making some time for us today.
Well, as we like to say in radio way back in the day, so long for this time. Until this time, next time, so long, everybody.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
We'll talk to you soon. Tim Brando, everybody, Fox Sports. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back on the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell on Fox Sports Radio.
Busy trying to get out.